And we are back, folks. Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. He is still on the other side of the pond, getting ready to come home back to Israel. Alex, while you've been gone, the Houthis, the Iranian-backed terrorist organization from Yemen, they've been extremely busy firing rockets and missiles at the state of Israel. Over Shabbat, about 3:30 in the morning, I was sleeping soundly. All of a sudden, you heard the attempted interceptions overhead as a ballistic missile was fired by the Houthis. Somehow, the defense system of the state of Israel was unable to shoot down the missile. The missile actually landed in a playground in the heart of Tel Aviv. 16 people lightly wounded. Imagine if that happened during the daytime. Several days earlier on Thursday, Alex, another Houthi missile fired at the state of Israel, this one also in the middle of the night, partially destroying a building, which was actually a school. Imagine if that happened during the day. So the Houthis firing missiles, ballistic missiles at the state of Israel. Israel, by the way, also responding to the Houthi threat, striking various terrorist targets, including 3 key ports of the Houthis, along with energy infrastructure, according to the IDF. So here we have this back and forth, Iranian-backed Houthis striking Israel, Israel also targeting the Houthis. Just one last point here. Overnight, according to U.S. CENTCOM, U.S. forces hitting Houthi targets in Yemen in response to attacks on U.S. warships. Let's break all that down, Alex.
Well, first of all, you have to ask yourself, why are the Houthis doing it at this point in the war? They've seen what Israel has done to Hamas. They've seen what Israel's done to Hezbollah. They've seen Syria fall. And now the Houthis are starting up again, after they'd been quiet for the last number of weeks or months, relatively speaking. They must know that what is going to strike them soon is going to be the long arm of Israel's law and potentially CENTCOM as well. And we've already just seen that now. The Prime Minister said recently that the Houthis are the last of the terror proxies of Iran that pose a threat to Israel. And you mentioned that Israel is just attacked with over 60 munitions hitting 3 major ports in Israel, and that follows an attack on the major Hodeida port several months back. And you get the sense that Israel, they've actually, unfortunately, nobody was hurt by the ballistic missiles that were launched, but they've just given a gift to Israel, which now is going to attack, and they've attacked also deep inside Sana'a, and I believe that they've been targeting top leadership of the Houthis. And you see that as much as the Houthis have fired on Israel, they haven't really been able to do the type of damage that they've expected. And certainly the Israeli strikes have been extremely targeted and done a tremendous amount of damage. That attack on Hodeida several months ago left a fire that was burning for a week, and it was a massive explosion. I think that as Israel files off all of Iran's proxies, this is the last one. And Israel will deal with it. Potentially, CENTCOM should deal with it too. The United States should deal with it. The Houthis have been interrupting international shipping now for months, forcing goods to go around the entire southern Horn of Africa, because they can't be trusted to have safe passage through the Red Sea, which is one of the world's major international waterways. Not sure what the Houthis are doing, but I have a good feeling that they're about to meet the same fate as Hamas and Hezbollah, and that will be the last of the terror proxies before this war shifts to the head of the terror octopus itself, which is Iran.
I agree with you there. I don't think people realize that the Houthis have fired over 200 missiles, according to JNS News, and 170 drones at Israel since the start of the war. I mean, that's 370 projectiles at the state of Israel. And I think also...
That's at Israel. Josh, that's at Israel. That's at Israel. They've also fired at U.S. ships in the region. I remember when the USS Carney was there for a significant period of time. That ship was very active, and they've been attacking at U.S. ships. They obviously have hijacked other commercial vessels. So they've been doing a lot of noise making, and they're about to meet their fate.
Yeah, President Trump, who's taking over now. President-elect Trump, who's taking over in about, 3.5 weeks or so. There was some news over the weekend unrelated to this, but he was upset about the way the Panama Canal is being handled in terms of U.S. cargo traveling through that canal. Just imagine, at least I'm hoping at least, his reaction to the fact that U.S. war vessels are being fired upon, and those other vessels, United States vessels in the Red Sea, are being hampered in terms of getting to where they need to go. I can only imagine his reaction once he's in office.
Yeah, I think that's right. And maybe they're trying to get in their last maneuvers now in the last month before he takes office. But yeah, I think that Israel understands that this is a threat that they need to take seriously. And this is also another example of Israel doing the work of the international community. Let's not forget that the Houthis didn't just start by attacking Israel. They've been attacking Saudi Arabia for years.
Yeah.
They're interrupting international waterways. They're striking at U.S. naval vessels. This is an international problem, and it's a problem that it's a war that Israel's fighting, not just on behalf of itself and its mainland, but really on behalf of the entire international community.
You talked about getting in their last licks there, and the Biden administration looks like they're doing the same thing when it comes to the situation in Syria. Of course, President Assad's regime has now fallen, but U.S. diplomats carrying out their first visit to the Syrian capital of Damascus in more than a decade this past Friday. And the United States has decided to drop the $10 million bounty, terrorism bounty, on the head of the Islamic HTS terror group. They were the so-called biggest of the rebel groups who are now in charge. They're calling the shots in Syria. And after just one visit, you had somebody responsible for his affiliation with al-Qaeda, the murder of American soldiers, servicemen on his head. And after just one visit, the Biden administration already goes ahead and drops that bounty. I find that outrageous. I think it's unbelievable. At the same time, you had this HTS leader, al-Julani, talking about women's rights and how, no, we're not going to be like the Taliban. Yet at the very same time, there was a journalist, I believe, who was trying to get a photo op with him, and he insisted that she cover her hair. And this was making front page headlines because it looks like that he is not moderate, even though he's playing that card. Looks like he's going to operate Syria very, very similar to the way the Taliban is running things in Afghanistan. But I'm very, very not surprised, but really disappointed with the U.S. that this is the first thing they do after not visiting Damascus in all this time, drop the bounty overnight. I mean, they don't even let him, they haven't even given this guy a chance to prove who he is or who he isn't. And they already, like nothing, dropped the bounty on him. Very disappointing.
Yeah, this is what we would call in Israel the old conceptia, the concept, the paradigms regarding Middle East leaders. Okay, the enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. Julani, as you mentioned, affiliated with Al Qaeda. Obviously, HTS and some of the other groups were trained, backed, armed, funded by Turkey to take advantage of this situation in which Assad became more weak because his backers, Iran and Russia, were unreliable backers, and they became weak or distracted. But Julani is not a great guy. I mean, he's been saying all the right things, but people have to understand the Arab culture. When they say, okay, he met with a group of Christian clerics recently. They were in full gown, but what they weren't wearing on their chests was the crosses that they usually wear when they met with Julani, because they were hiding them. And Julani had told them that they will be able to practice their religion freely according to Islamic law. Okay, so when you say that phrase, practice your religion freely according to Islamic law, that's a contradiction of terms. That means that you'll be able to serve practice your religion as a second-class citizen in Syria if we don't kill you according to Islamic law. That women will have full rights according to Islamic law, which means that you have to cover your hair. These are people that want Sharia law established in Syria. The reason why they're saying that they're not going to attack Israel right now is that Israel doesn't take them out. Okay, we see the work that Israel's been doing over the last months to take out the leadership of Hamas, to take out the leadership of Hezbollah. Israel struck Fuad Shukr and some of the other, and Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon and some of the other leaders, and they had huge bounties on their head by the United States. I don't think, by the way, that the United States paid Israel the bounty for killing them.
No, I doubt that.
I wonder if Israel could make a claim there in the International Criminal Court for the bounty. But United States removing the bounty from al-Jawlani's head, specifically such that Israel will not take him out. And I think Israel is going to watch carefully. If they come down and start making any movements towards Israel, you could be sure that Israel is now living by a different paradigm, not this paradigm. Israel brought in arch terrorist Yasser Arafat back to lead the Palestinian Authority. What did that get them? Israel let terrorists like Yahya Sinwar out of prison in a prisoner exchange deal. And what did that get them? So they're aware of who al-Jawlani is. I don't think that Israel wants to police Syria, meaning that if Syrian leaders are going to be killing Syrians, I don't think Israel's going to deal with that. But if they make even the first move towards the state of Israel at this point, you can be sure that Israel will treat them the same way that they've treated the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Absolutely. And Alex, you mentioned Turkey. Here with this vacuum now in Syria, Turkey trying to be the powerhouse in the Middle East, trying to seize the opportunity there. You had news over the weekend, Turkish-backed fighters killed the U.S., several U.S.-backed Kurdish forces. Again, Turkey supporting some of these so-called rebel groups. Turkey's President Erdogan releasing a statement also claiming Jerusalem is our city. Some more inflammatory rhetoric from him. Turkey, of course, also hosting some of the leaders of Hamas. They really want to be a major player here in the Middle East. They are very, very aggressive. They have been for years against the state of Israel. I'm thinking all the way back till that flotilla where Turkish terrorists came on that boat. I think it was back in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, and the whole brouhaha over that. But now that they're able to establish a foothold there in Syria, I think we're going to see a lot more of Turkish President Erdogan, who is very, very power hungry. We're going to see him on the world stage, specifically when it comes to Syria.
Yeah, Erdogan is not necessarily a stable and dependable force for the international community. Wants to reestablish the Ottoman Empire or some sort of a caliphate, sees the weakness left by Iran and the vacuum there, also is a foe of Russia, sees that Russia is now distracted in Syria and has pulled its military out and wants a piece of the action. How far they'll go at this stage, they play the game strategically. They will bide their time. They can be patient. They saw the opportunity in Syria. They funded and backed these terror factions for years, and then seeing the weakness, ordered them to go forward. And then they went one city at a time. They started with Aleppo, and they succeeded there, and then they continued through other parts of Syria until Bashar Assad was forced to flee. It actually all happened very quickly. I don't think that they will challenge Israel at this moment. They will probably seek to achieve some kind of stability over there for the time being, so that they don't get immediately into a war with Israel. But they have now improved their position. Turkey's improved its position vis-a-vis Syria and getting closer to Israel, and will bide its time and will not attack Israel when it's perceived that Israel is strong, but will wait for another moment. The same way that Hamas waited for a moment to see Israel's vulnerability. Obviously, Hamas was preparing their October 7th attack for a long period of time, waiting for the moment when they perceived Israel to be weak. And you can trust that Erdogan will do the same. If Israel lets down its guard, demonstrates some degree of vulnerability or weakness, then Israel should be nervous about what could happen from al-Jawlani's group. Meanwhile, al-Jawlani is the one who's weak. They're not super strong right now. They were stronger than Assad. They have to consolidate power, and they will try to do that. And we have to see now what the new U.S. administration will do when they come into office. Yes, sure, Biden dropped the terror distinction on HTS and al-Jawlani. But we have to watch the behavior, and we have to see whether the Trump administration will flip the switch right back on with regard to that terror designation. That can happen.
And Turkey somehow still a member of NATO despite their aggression. We'll have to see how that plays out. But switching gears here.
Josh, there's no mechanism to kick any country out of NATO.
Yeah.
But there have been rumblings that the United States is threatening, at least under the new administration, to reconsider its own position inside NATO. We remember that the Trump administration forced all of the member countries of NATO to pay their fair share, which I think made a lot of sense. there's definitely voices inside the fringes of the administration trying to urge Trump to get out of NATO together. And in that way, I think that Trump actually has a lot of leverage over NATO and potentially over Turkey too, because while there isn't a mechanism to throw a country out of NATO, the United States can turn around and say, look, you have a choice, NATO. You can either have the United States or you can have Turkey, make your pick. And I think in that case, it's very clear. And I don't think that Erdogan wants to get kicked out of NATO right now. So because if the United States under Trump will use such a threat, even if it's a back channel threat, that might force Erdogan to recalculate his own aggression right now and to remain calm and not further destabilize the region.
Switching gears here, Alex, and this story also is infuriating. Guess who cannot go pay tribute to those murdered Jews in the Holocaust at Auschwitz? None other than our very own Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to reports, Prime Minister Netanyahu will avoid traveling to Poland next month for events marking the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz Nazi death camp, fearing that he may be arrested. Again, this goes back to the ICC ruling against Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant, according to a Polish report on Friday. Can you imagine that? 80 years after the worst massacre in humanity against the Jewish people, and the Prime Minister, the leader of the State of Israel, the Jewish state, cannot pay tribute to those murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau, 80 years on the anniversary of the liberation, because he's Israeli, because he's a Jew, because he's the leader of the Jewish people here in the State of Israel. It's preposterous. This story just, makes my blood boil. It's complete insanity. It is, the world we're living in now, Alex, at times is just absolutely mad. And I'll let you comment on that story.
Yeah, I mean, the arrest warrants are out for Netanyahu and for former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. I'm not sure that the Prime Minister would have gone to Auschwitz in any case. I mean, the March of the Living goes every year, and the Prime Minister doesn't usually join that. But obviously, it's a big concern for Netanyahu
Not
to go
even
to Europe.
having the option to go, even if you weren't to go.
Right.
I'm telling
I would
you,
have.
unbelievable.
I would have guessed that Poland would be one of the countries that the Prime Minister would feel safe to go. Poland has been actually a pretty loyal ally of Israel, much more so than a lot of the Western European countries, although there have been many efforts by the liberal left in Israel to try to harm the relationship between Israel and Poland, which is something that Yair Lapid was doing continuously, trying to poke his finger in the eyes of the Poles. And make them think twice about their own relationship with Israel, which is absolutely ridiculous policy. The Poles they bought the bait, and when Lapid was baiting them, they did get upset, and Netanyahu had been working hard over the years to establish very strong relations with many of these Eastern European countries. Right now, I mean, if you look where a Jew can feel safest to walk around Europe would be Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary.
Yeah.
These are the countries that Western Europeans dislike. Why? Because those are the countries that refuse to accept millions of Muslim refugees into their countries, and because of that, those countries are much safer. And Poland, while they do have something of a chip on their shoulder regarding the Holocaust and how Jews will blame Poles for being anti-Semitic ahead of World War II. The Poles think, look, it was the Germans that set up the concentration camps, not the Poles. On the one hand, they're right. On the other hand, the Poles, didn't really love Jews that much and collaborated to a certain extent with the Germans with regard to the Jews. Yes, 6 million Poles were killed in World War II, only 3 million of them Jews. So Poles definitely did suffer at the hands of Germans there, and their country was being fought over by both the Russians and the Germans. But the Poles have actually done an amazing thing by protecting the concentration camps as museums, such that Israelis can go there year after year, and they do. So we're going to be celebrating now this year the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz. I might be there, Josh. I know you've gone in the past. I think
March of the
this year,
Living, and I've gone several times. Yes.
I guess the prime minister is not going to be able to go.
Nope. And it's just a crazy, crazy story. I don't know what's more upsetting, the Al Julani lifting the bounty on Al Julani, or what transpired here with the fact that our prime minister can't go. They're both disappointing. Alex, over the last several weeks while you've been in the States, nearly every night on Israel's main news, which is at 7:50 p.m., usually the top story these days are the hostage negotiations, talking about the situation down in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu saying he would not agree to end the war before we remove Hamas. That was one of the original line items in which Netanyahu said, we will not end the war until, number one, all the hostages are returned, Hamas is removed for power, and there's no longer a threat emanating from Gaza. So Netanyahu is saying, even with negotiations, every day they say negotiations are moving forward. They have some sort of framework. Things are not etched in stone in terms of how many hostages will potentially be released in the first round, potentially coming up any day now. But the prime minister making clear, actually, as he did with the situation in Lebanon, saying the war is not over with Hezbollah. This is a ceasefire which could end at any minute. He's sticking to his guns with this point as well, that even through hostage negotiations, and please God, we'll get back some of the hostages any day now, or at least the deal will come into play any day now. Hopefully, we won't have to give away too many security prisoners. But that being said, Netanyahu making it clear this is not the end of the war. Israel will still maintain a military presence, whether it's in the Philadelphia corridor, perhaps in the Netzarim route as well. It remains to be seen, but a lot of talk now, Alex, more than ever, at least from what I remember over the last several months, in terms of a potential hostage negotiation, hostage deal, and exchange, unfortunately, for those terrorist prisoners being held in Israeli jails.
Well, we didn't really see the Biden administration exert leverage against Hamas, against Qatar, forcing the release of hostages. Really, most of the leverage that the United States was putting in public was against Israel, forcing it to slow down, to not use specific weapons, not to enter Rafah, not to take the Philadelphia corridor. And the more the United States pressured Israel, the more Hamas was able to double down on their positions, right? We found the Hamas documents that said that they wanted to exploit the hatred by the left wing in Israel and by the international community for Benjamin Netanyahu. And so when the Biden administration was calling for Netanyahu's removal from office, that just encouraged Hamas to hold tighter onto the hostages, as opposed to letting them go if they would have perceived, as they did in the beginning of the war, that Israel is strong. That's why they let 100 hostages go early on in the war. But then as more and more pressure was laid on Israel, the Hamas doubled down on the holding of the hostages. And it wasn't until the President Trump won election that suddenly he said that if the hostages are not released prior to his inauguration, that there will be, quote, all hell to pay. Well, guess what? It's been a few weeks and we're getting closer to the election. And so suddenly Hamas understands that they have every incentive now to let hostages go. We saw Qatar in the day after the election all of a sudden say that Hamas leaders are no longer welcome in that country, right? You understand that the United States has a lot of leverage here, and they can turn around, let's say, to the Gazans and say, the Biden administration was forcing humanitarian aid and Israel to deliver humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. The Trump administration could say, look, we'll double humanitarian aid if you let the hostages out. But if you don't let the hostages out, we'll completely cut off the humanitarian aid. So you have a choice. You can either have double humanitarian aid, and we'd like you to take that one, or you could have zero humanitarian aid. There's a lot of leverage here that can be applied. It's good that Israel's saying that they will not leave the Gaza Strip under any circumstances. This does not mean the end of the war. It just means a period of a ceasefire. I think that Israel can live with those tactics. I don't think that Israel can live with receiving hostages back in piecemeal, or saying, okay, there's phase one today and phase two 30 days later. No, we're past that. Phase one was already several months back. We got 100 hostages back. It's time for phase two. It has to be a final phase. If it plays itself out over a period of a week or whatever, and it's a phased release, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever it is, Israel can deal with that. But the idea that some will remain in captivity beyond this round should be an abominable idea for all Israelis. Secondly, the idea that Israel should be releasing security prisoners back into society should be a complete non-starter. People talk about releasing convicted killer Marwan Barghouti in return for the hostages. Are you kidding? Like, people think that Marwan Barghouti is going to be the next leader of the Palestinian Authority. Let's guess again, okay? The United States might take down a terror designation on Al Julani. Israel's not going to take down a terror designation on a convicted murderer and let him out of prison. We saw what happened when we released Yahya Sinwar. Okay, it just can't happen. If some security prisoners have to be let out, they can't be let out back into the society as happened in the first round. You can't have convicted murderers going back to Jerusalem, going back to Judea and Samaria. If they want some prisoners to be let out and go into exile and go to Turkey or whatever, maybe that's something that Israel can deal with. But Israel's got a lot of leverage right now, and I hope that they apply it to the max. And hopefully, God willing, we'll see the return of all the hostages alive, and also get the bodies back, those that have been murdered in captivity, so we can finally get closure to this horrific nightmare that's been lasting for the last 14, 15 months.
Yeah, we do have unconfirmed reports indicating that Israel has stated clearly that their position is that those who are in fact released will not be released to Gaza, will not be released to Judea and Samaria. And just last night, Israeli officials said that Marwan Barghouti, in case people don't remember, mass murderer back in the so-called Second Intifada, murdering Jews, murdering Israelis. Israeli officials last night saying that he will not be released in the hostage deal. Again, none of this has been confirmed. We have somewhat of a framework which has been mentioned by the media, and I don't even know if we should talk about it, because again, all of this is speculation. Nothing is officially agreed upon, but there is some sort of framework, a 6-week ceasefire or whatnot, with the release of the hostages. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. At the same time, over the weekend, just a little bit of a Gaza update. Israeli forces discovered and destroyed a 4.7-mile-long Hamas terror tunnel beneath the northern Gaza city of Beit Lahia. Also discovering all of this ammunition and weapons that Hamas, of course, has been using from October 7th and before against the state of Israel, rocket launchers and whatnot. The Kfir Brigade continue its operations according to the IDF, there in Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. At the same time, relevant to where you are in the United States, a terrorist attack, a terrorist plot thwarted. An Egyptian 18-year-old national, actually a student at George Mason University, with reported ties to ISIS, was arrested. His plans were to attack the Israeli consulate in New York City. Thank God he was stopped in his tracks. He was caught before he was able to carry out this attack. We're seeing this thwarted attack. We're seeing schools and synagogues in Toronto, in Montreal, and in cities throughout North America, and of course in different places in Australia. You can name it. I mean, anti-Semitism, rabid anti-Semitism running rampant in many, many places around the world.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned two things there. First, explaining that the terror tunnel found in northern Gaza. This is why it's clear that the IDF has to continue to operate in the Gaza Strip. Okay, there's still terror infrastructure there, even though the IDF's moved from north to south and cleared it out. Hamas continues to reorganize itself and consolidate, and the IDF has to keep working over there. There's more tunnels, there's more weapons, there's more infrastructure. Israel has to completely and totally demilitarize Hamas, and then go on to the second part of the campaign, which is to remove Hamas as a military power. Now, meanwhile, there's no place safe in the world, necessarily for Israelis. We saw Tzvi Kogan, the Chabad rabbi who was murdered. He was a rabbi in Abu Dhabi, murdered in Dubai. Recently, there have been threats on other Chabad houses and other consulates. The attack, this is a global intifada that is being launched against the state of Israel. And Israel has to be on its guard, and even if it declares a victory in this war, which God willing we'll see soon. As this war moves into the fourth quarter and the terror proxies are further defanged, and hopefully the war will shift to Iran itself, where the head of that terror octopus will be removed first, finally. But it doesn't mean that there's no more terror around the world. It doesn't mean that there's no more individuals or cells out there that want to strike against Jewish and Israeli targets. It's a dangerous world for Jews out there today, and we see that even in countries that are deemed to be the safest for Jews, including the United States.
Here on the local front in Judea and Samaria, you're talking about potential for terrorism. And this story got basically like one line. It was like briefed in different news sources covering Israel and the Middle East. There was an attempt by 20 Arabs, Palestinian Authority Arabs, to infiltrate Israel in northern Samaria, from northern Samaria, I should say, according to Israeli media on Saturday. According to reports, security forces in the area responded by shooting, and one of the Arabs was killed. Now, this could be a one-off, but that being said, after the October 7th massacre, I don't think we should take anything for granted. When you have a group of 20 Arabs, maybe some of them armed, trying to infiltrate, whether it's from Jordan, let's say, into Judea and Samaria, or from Judea and Samaria towards the greater Tel Aviv area, I think we have to take these incidents really, really seriously and make sure that they can't happen, because all these people, when you have 80% of a population saying they're in support of the October 7th massacre, I think you have to be very, very careful with each and every incident. Remember, before October 7th, you had those mass protests on the Gaza border, and we should have recognized there the potential threat with those people approaching the border, as they eventually did on the 7th. And that's why while this item was barely touched, it was just a short news brief in media here, I think we have to be very, very careful that this doesn't become a daily or a regular occurrence with Arabs trying to infiltrate through the security barrier and come into the greater Tel Aviv area.
Yeah, this isn't a one-off at all. I mean, we know that the only reason why there hasn't been a full-scale intifada in Judea and Samaria, well, there's two reasons. Number one is I think that there are a lot of Palestinians that recognize that they don't want their fate to turn into the fate of their brothers in Gaza. They see the damage that Israel has levied in Gaza, and they don't want it to happen in their communities. But I think the second reason, and no less important, is that the IDF has been extraordinarily active in Judea and Samaria. This is the purpose of having the Israeli military be sovereign in the area and be responsible for overall security control, so that they can go in and out of these areas. And we've seen major IDF operations in Tulkarm and Farah and in Jenin and elsewhere. And this is what the folly was of pulling out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, when Israel uprooted 8,500 Israeli citizens from 21 thriving Jewish communities inside Gaza, because the IDF was embedded with those communities, and the IDF was able to move in and out of the Arab neighborhoods in Gaza as it needed in order to implement the strategy that we refer to in Israel as mowing the grass and pulling out the weeds. Whenever there's a terror cell, the IDF goes in, takes care of the cell, and doesn't allow a situation to build up and fester like Hamas was able to do in Gaza, building a whole system of tunnels longer than the New York City subway system, because Israel and the IDF wasn't there to know it and or to prevent it. So Israel has been doing this in Judea and Samaria. Certainly, it's a threat that you could see an intifada coming from Arab Israeli cities like Jerusalem or Lod and Ramla and others. And especially coming from from the Arab communities, rather, in Judea and Samaria, that the international community commonly calls the West Bank, because they don't want you to know that the West Bank is called Judea and Samaria, because it's a lot easier to say that Jews don't belong in the West Bank than it is to say that Jews don't belong in Judea. So look, it's a big threat, and the truth is that I think that after this war concludes, attention is going to be turned to Judea and Samaria, going to be turned to the Palestinian Authority. Just last week, we saw, the headlines that the Palestinian Authority was actually engaged in a security operation inside Jenin, right? And you'd say, well, why are they doing that? And the reason why they're doing that is because They want to be viewed as an al-Jolani. They want the terror distinction removed against them. They want the United States to consider them a partner, or an agent of stability in the region, not a terror organization. Even though the Palestinian Authority continues to incentivize the murder of Jews, continues to incite the murder of Jews, so they're trying right now to play good cop and to say, look, we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. But ultimately, we have to see what's going to be after this war, what Israel's position looks like, and whether Israel is going to try to assert a greater amount of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and whether Israel is going to take steps to dismantle the Palestinian Authority itself the way it is dismantling Hamas and dismantling Hezbollah.
Alex, you said that we are in the fourth quarter of this war. Of course, I love the football reference, so thanks for that. But we're going to finish with some positive news here today, and I think you're absolutely right that we are getting towards the end. And the reason that I believe so is that the skies are reopening in Israel. 6 airlines will restore their Israel routes by next week. The Romanian airline Biz Airlines, Spanish carrier Air Europe, Hungarian airline Wizz Air, LOT, which is the Polish airline, Air Baltic, and Bulgaria Air, all now getting themselves back into the market. There's talk about other airlines who will reinstitute their routes to Tel Aviv or Lod Airport. So that is some positive news. It's a strong indicator that the international community sees that we are on the verge of winning this war. Hopefully, it will be a huge victory over all of our enemies on all 7 fronts. But I think it's great to finish off this week's show on some positive news. This will bring tourism back to Israel. So many benefits of these airlines coming back to Israel.
Well, let's face it, Josh. I must say that the closure of the airways by these airlines has been nothing short of a boycott. It's a BDS move. You could see for weeks and weeks that there's no reason why the rockets shouldn't. That the airplane should not have been flying. There was a short period of time in which there was the threat of rockets, and I certainly understand that you don't want to fly if there's incoming rockets, but most of the time it's been safe to fly. El Al has been flying every single day since this war started without incident, and that all the airlines simultaneously decided that they wouldn't be able to fly, or that the insurance company said, we won't insure your planes to fly to Israel. There's been nothing short of a boycott specifically meant to harm Israel's tourism, which is a major industry in the country. I'm glad that LOT is one of the airlines that's opening up. That's one of the Sky Alliance airlines. And if a Sky Alliance airline opens up, they have others like Lufthansa and United hopefully will restart soon. And I think that the Trump administration coming into office is going to put an end to this boycott. And they're going to turn around to the FTA and to say that, look, you have to open the skies, stop boycotting Israel. For me, it's going to be good. I mean, I can't tell you how much money we're paying now to just fly on economy to get out of Israel, because El Al is basically the only show in town. Israelis have not been able to travel as they like to do, and Israelis love to travel. Okay, it's good news that the skies are opening again, but was not encouraging that they were closed to begin with.
Absolutely. And on that note, Alex, wishing you a safe trip back home to Israel. Hopefully we'll see you next week here in studio. Yeah, that's the plan, right?
I'm going from here to the airport right now, and hopefully we'll be back in Israel shortly. It's been a long trip, a successful trip, good for JNS. People are very receptive to the JNS message and to supporting JNS. People understand the importance of a strong nonprofit Jewish news agency. But it'll be great to be back in the land, and we've got a lot of work to do here. We can't let our guard down in the fourth quarter. We got to play at our best.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS News, thanks for joining us halfway across the world. And make sure you tune in to all of the wonderful programming on JNS TV via YouTube, and go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world. Have a great week, everybody. Continue to pray for the well-being of the brave men and women of the IDF who are protecting us here in the land of Israel 24/7. Join us next week on JLMinute here from JNS TV. Have a great week, everybody.